Welcome to the last video in our Ansys simulation software tutorial series. Today we are going to be covering some miscellaneous tips and solutions to some common errors that may occur when you are using Ansys Workbench or Ansys Mechanical. Some of these may have been covered already in the videos previous, so if you are not coming from the rest of this tutorial series, then those will be covered for you, and if you are coming out of that tutorial series, then just bear with me a little bit. Tip number 1 is that when loading Ansys Mechanical, if you move your mouse over the buttons and no box appears, Ansys Mechanical is not fully started. But if you keep moving your mouse and then finally the buttons start to respond to you, and they show this little box around them, then you know that Ansys Mechanical has fully started. Tip number 2 is about rotating geometry. Let's say you have your cantilever phone geometry and you want to view it with the bottom facing straight up. To rotate your geometry to the right, you can hold down with your middle mouse button and spin that to the left. That will rotate your geometry to the right. And conversely, if you want to rotate your geometry to the left, grab it and rotate to the right. The smaller your circles, the smaller the increments will be. The larger your circles, the larger the increments will be. And this works along the same principles of doing this sort of thing. So I could do this, and then this, and then this, and then I can do the same thing again. And each time my geometry is going to be rotated around in the pattern. Tip number 3 is that you can rename almost anything here in the design tree. This is very useful if you have multiple supports or multiple forces and you don't want to get them all confused. For example, let's say we have a fixed support for the base and then a fixed support on the end of our cantilever phone. We could click this and press F2 to rename this as base support. And alternatively, to rename, you could right click and then go down to rename, and you could name this phone tip support. And the same applies for these forces, one of which is pointing down right here and one is pointing up. You could rename this with F2 to downward force, and you could right click and rename this one to upward force. And that will make your life easier with everything renamed. It's useful to keep something like support in the name if it's a support, or force if it's a force, but this helps you differentiate all of your tree items. Number 4 is going to be what if you can't find something in the tree. For example, we want to edit our mesh for this geometry, but if you go through all of these options, or if you expand them, you'll see that mesh is nowhere to be found. And the reason for this is that this filter right up here is filtering out mesh. This will let you search through a number of different things, and the best way to clear this instead of messing around with it is just to click the little eraser button right here. It's going to clear the search, and you can see now mesh is showing up right here once again. In this case, the reason that this was filtered in the first place was that I clicked something, right-clicked, and click Filter Tree based on visible bodies. So if you're trying to do something like hide a body and you accidentally right-click and click Filter Tree based on visible bodies, you might not see anything happen or even realize you misclicked, and then mesh is going to disappear and you might not realize why that's happened. So just bear in mind that that can happen, and the eraser button is your friend if something disappears from the tree. Tip number 5. Let's say you are trying to edit the phone tip support and the geometry selection for that. So you go to select this and it doesn't work, and you hold control and you try to select this one and that one doesn't work either. And no matter how many times you click, it is just not working. The reason for this, if you'll notice, our mouse icon has a little box to the bottom right. That indicates that up here under select, box select has been left on and not single select. So if you select single select, now we will have a little cube icon instead of a little box icon, but only when you hover over something. And this will let you select geometries the way that you want it to. Time for tip number 6. What happens if we change something in Workbench like materials data? Well, let's just try it. Open engineering data sources, grab some titanium alloy, close data sources, and delete structural steel. Now we only have titanium alloy in our project. If you go back to mechanical, you may expect it to immediately change, but it has not. It is still structural steel. That's because Workbench has not yet communicated this to mechanical. There are 3, maybe more, ways to update the project when this happens. 2 of them are right here: refresh project and update project. And the third one is to right-click the big tree item, not this one, but this one, and then click refresh. If you select refresh right here, you're going to see that clear up, and now materials is titanium alloy. If we go back and we change this yet again, and we add some polyethylene, close this and delete titanium alloy, we can see the same thing happen again. If we right click materials and then click refresh materials, now polyethylene will show up. Let's assign this to polyethylene real quick. And now let's change this again, except this time we are going to change the geometry. So part 1 is our cantilever iPhone, and it is all one part. Excuse me, cantilever Y phone. So let's change the geometry to Trinity lower airframe. We are still going to see our cantilever phone over here. And the last way to update that is going to be to click Update Project. But beware that if you click this, as long as everything under here has been set up correctly, which in this case it has not, since these now have no selection, it is going to solve everything in order. So you can see where mesh previously had a lightning bolt, now it has been solved, and that is because this button will solve everything in order. It just did not solve the rest of these because the geometry was changed, and so of course the selections were changed as well. If we close this guy right here and then throw down some selections for this and this and maybe this guy right here and this one, and we go back to Workbench and we click Update Project, we can see that it is going to solve everything in order. Now these have the green lightning bolt, and pretty soon, once this wraps up right here, we're going to see a green check mark right here in Workbench. So keep in mind, these are the 3 buttons: refresh, update, and right-click the big tree item. Tip number 7 is that you can actually have multiple analysis systems listed at once if you didn't already know this. You can drag them in here, you can drag anything in here, and you can start moving them around in whatever order you like in almost a little building blocks style. And you can actually start to form connections between these by clicking and dragging. You can see that this can connect to engineering data or to model. You can connect engineering data here and geometry here. And then if we open up model, this should pull up mechanical a second time and let us see an identical simulation setup as far as engineering data and geometry goes. We will have to re-enter our model because this one cannot be connected, unfortunately. So now here we can see we have our 2 mechanicals. If you do want to connect model and have everything essentially identical, you'd have to do that by going into Workbench or into Mechanical, clicking here, click Static Structural, and this is going to add another one right here. You can see it's going to share Model, which is all of this stuff, and it's going to share geometry and engineering data. And you can also do this by right-clicking and duplicating, and that is going to keep all of the little tree items here the same. Tip number 8, if you click on static structural, this will let you see all of your forces and your fixed supports at the same time without having to switch back between them. This is just very useful to know. Alrighty, time for troubleshooting number 1. So I've set up this geometry and this simulation. Let's click solve and see what happens. This one should go by pretty fast. We've got our green little electric lightning bolts. Pretty soon they turn to red. So what do? First thing, we're going to click messages. Not enough constraints appear to be applied. Solver pivot warnings have been encountered. Ill-conditioned matrix, no clue what that means. Unreasonable material properties, that could be checked. Under constrained model, that could be checked. Or contact related issues. This one aligns with the not enough constraints, so that's worth bearing in mind. This one says a solver pivot warning has been detected on a specific node, which we might be able to find. Unreasonable material properties, under constrained model. So we're getting a couple of different things here. Let's take a look at under constrained model. First, we can also go to solution information. Scroll through here, see if anything is throwing an error at us. Warning, warning, warning. Element shape checking, condition conjugate. Less than 3 constraints in the current model. Okay, that's an issue. Well, let's take a look. If you look under here, we can see that there is only a force applied. There is no constraint applied. There's no support applied to our model. So let's fix that. We're going to click fixed. We're going to apply that. Excuse me. I click fixed support. Please function properly. Insert fixed support. There we go. And that is the geometry that we want selected in this case. Now let's click solve and see what happens. Alrighty, it gave a screen check mark, so that is solved, and we don't need to worry about our errors anymore. Alrighty, troubleshooting number 2. Let's click solve and see what happens. We've got green lightning bolts. Everything is good so far. And now we have red lightning bolts, so something has happened. An unknown error occurred. So this is not giving us any information under messages. Check solver output on the solution information for possible causes. This is the solution information file that it is speaking of. So we can start to read through this. Ansys license manager error. Insufficient license count of HPC. Only 16 of the 17 requested tasks were available. Insufficient HPC licenses available. And then we're seeing 17 cores listed, including number 0. In this case, I already know, since I was the one setting up Ansys, that I selected 17 cores to be used for solving. So I would be able to make an educated guess that it's saying only 16 are allowed, and I asked it to use 17. And I could also make an educated guess that using more than 16 cores requires a high power computer license, which I know that I do not have. In your case, if you are using the student version of Ansys, the maximum number of cores allowed will be 4, and it might say something like, pretend your computer has 16 cores and you asked it to use 16. It might say something like only 4 of the 16 requested tasks were available. So that is your hint to change this number back to what your license allows, and click solve and see if anything changes there. And there you go. We have green check marks and no more errors are being thrown at us. So that's also a tip off. Remember to make sure you have the acceptable number of cores for the license for Ansys that you are using. Troubleshooting number 3. Let's click solve and see what happens this time. Again, we are getting red lightning bolts. An unknown error has occurred. Check the solver output and solution information. Solve might start to fail if the correct GPU device is not installed. Please check the GPU device requirements carefully. So this one is our tip off right here. It doesn't like our GPU. So number of GPUs requested, GPU acceleration, it's telling us that. Nothing so far besides maybe something about the cores as well. So that might be worth looking into. And it cuts off pretty soon right here. So we could try adjusting our cores. Only 16 of the 17 available, but we only requested 16. So let's change this to 4 and see if that fixes it. We're getting the same GPU message here down in the corner. Again, we're getting a red lightning bolt, so we know that the cores are not the reason that this is showing up. It's no longer saying anything about cores under solution information. So the solution here took me a long time to find, and if I had to guess, it's a pretty common error for students who are using Ansys on their laptops instead of at a professional workstation computer. The solution is to disable GPU acceleration. First, we're going to put our cores back up to 16 since that wasn't the error, and I know that works for my computer. Go into File, Solve for SS Settings, My Computer, Advanced, GPU Acceleration, and click None. Okay, okay. And you'll note that you'll note that the two options here, My Computer and My Computer Background, are the same that show up here. So just leave this on My Computer. You might want to change My Computer Background to no GPU acceleration as well, but I have never used My Computer Background and I'm not really sure what it does. So now let's click solve and try it again and see if this happens. And there we go. We have a check mark now that Ansys is not trying to use GPU acceleration. So this is also a tip-off if you are doing this on a gaming laptop or something like that for college. Make sure GPU acceleration is off unless you have a GPU that Ansys accepts. This one took me a while to figure out, so I hope I'm saving you little pain and grief by telling you ahead of time. Troubleshooting number 4. I worked for a while on this rocket's lower airframe trying to simulate this situation where the upper fin is fixed and the lower two fins are receiving an upward force. And every time I tried to solve it, it kept saying solver pivot warning, solver pivot warning. And I had no idea what that meant, and I still frankly have no idea what that means. But the problem was eventually solved when I imported this geometry, which is actually a multi-body geometry. So instead of just a single body, there are multiple of them. This was fixed when I imported the geometry into SolidWorks, used the SolidWorks combine function to turn all of the many bodies into one single body, and then I replaced the geometry that I was using with a combined version where they were all a single body, and then when I applied that, everything went away and I was able to quickly solve the problem, the simulation from there. So you can see now I've imported the new geometry, updated the structural assignment, updated the forces and fixed supports. And if we quickly generate a mesh, and then have Ansys solve the simulation, then it will stop throwing us errors and we should be able to get some results. Alright, now the meshing is done. Let's solve this simulation. This almost looks like an Imperial shuttle. Dun, 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 da, 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 da. Okay. And there you have the results. It's not throwing solver pivot warnings anymore, and we're able to get our results. So if you're ever getting a bunch of warnings like that, you may consider importing your geometry into whatever CAD software you use, turning it all into one body instead of multiple bodies, and then re-importing it and running the simulation again. And finally, if you get stuck on Ansys and you need some help, you can leave a comment down below. I will try to help you if it's a beginner level problem that I'm familiar with. And of course, you can always use any of Ansys's help options, including their help menus, pressing F1, which should open up a sidebar or may take you straight to the web. And Ansys Mechanical has its own little help option up here. If you press F1, oftentimes it will take you straight to Ansys's help webpage, which will tell you all about whatever item it is that you have selected. In this case, it is a material, and it tells you all about it. And there's also Reddit, and there's also YouTube. There are plenty of resources out there for you to get help if you get stuck on Ansys, so don't be afraid to reach out. And that wraps it up for this tutorial and this tutorial series. Congratulations on completing this Ansys simulation software tutorial series. I hope and I'm sure that you've picked up a lot along the way and that you've learned something, and I'm sure you're now a much more competent user of Ansys simulation software. So, as always, I pray that the Lord would bless your engineering and that he would bless you according to your efforts. And come visit us at Liberty University sometime. If you come down for college for a weekend, they will waive your application fee, at least as of the making of this video. It's a great college, and I heartily recommend it. So may you have a good experience on whatever your next engineering project is.